Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Jawad Tehami and these are the headlines. Pakistan's National Security Advisor says Islamabad has proof of India's involvement in terrorist activities in Pakistan. In an interview, Mueed Yusuf said the mastermind of the 2014 APS attack was in contact with the Indian intelligence agency RAW. He said RAW was also behind terror attacks on the Chinese consulate and the stock exchange building in Karachi. He said India's malicious propaganda can't change Pakistan's position on the Kashmir dispute. China says it does not recognize Ladakh as a union territory which was illegally set up by India in August last year. In a statement, a Chinese foreign ministry spokesman said infrastructure development in the region is the root cause for the tensions. The two sides have been locked in a face-off in Ladakh since May, and tensions peaked in June when 20 Indian soldiers were killed in clashes. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has called on Azerbaijan and Armenia to implement a Russia-brokered ceasefire. The call for restraint was made as Turkey urged the world powers to press Armenia to withdraw from occupied territories of Azerbaijan. Over 500 people have been killed since the fighting over the disputed region of Nagorno-Karabakh broke out last month. India has again reported the world's highest 706 COVID-19 deaths and over 55,000 infections overnight. Meanwhile, a White House physician said US President Donald Trump has tested negative for COVID-19. In Pakistan, 8 people have died from the virus overnight, taking the toll to 6,588. Globally, the virus has claimed over 1,079,000 lives and infected over 37.7 million people. Those are the headlines and detailed stories right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. And now for the news in detail. Pakistan's National Security Advisor says Islamabad has proof of India's involvement in terrorist activities in Pakistan. In an interview, Mueed Yusuf said the mastermind of the 2014 APS attack was in contact with the Indian intelligence agency RAW. At least 150 people, mostly children, were martyred in the attack. He went on to say that RAW was also behind terror attacks on the Chinese consulate and the stock exchange building in Karachi. Referring to the long-standing Kashmir dispute, the National Security Advisor said India's propaganda can't change Pakistan's position on the issue. Anti-India clashes have erupted in Srinagar after the Indian occupying forces martyred 2 more Kashmiris. Locals say Indian troops set house of a Kashmiri family on fire during the operation. Following the martyrdom, scores of people came out protesting. They chanted anti-India slogans and clashed with the occupying forces. The Indian troops fired tear gas and shot pellets to disperse the protesters, injuring many. China says it does not recognize Ladakh as a union territory which was illegally set up by India in August last year. In a statement, a Chinese foreign ministry spokesman said infrastructure development in the region is the root cause for the tensions. This came in response to the construction of 44 new bridges by India to facilitate movement of troops and weapons closer to the border. The spokesman urged India to refrain from actions that might escalate the situation and take measures to safeguard peace along the border. India and China have been locked in a face-off in Ladakh since May, and tensions peaked in June when 20 Indian soldiers were killed in clashes. China has urged the US to immediately stop selling arms to the country's Taiwan region. The Chinese Foreign Ministry warned that Beijing will make a legitimate response in wake of the recent developments. Spokesperson Zhao Lin said arms sales to Taiwan breaches one China principle and three China-US joint communique. He said the breach severely undermines China's sovereignty and security interests. Zhao said the US should also cut all the military connections with the Taiwan region. Welcome back. The contact groups of the Afghan government and the Taliban have resumed talks in the Qatari capital of Doha. Taliban spokesperson Mohammed Naeem said the two sides discussed all the contentious issues in detail. Naeem said they also agreed to continue meetings to reach a resolution. The two sides are trying to reach a consensus regarding ground rules of engagement in the core intra-Afghan dialogue. The dialogue hit a snag after Kabul refused to acknowledge the Doha Pact as the base document for dialogue. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has called on Azerbaijan and Armenia to implement a Russia-brokered ceasefire. In a tweet, Pompeo said civilian casualties must be stopped in the ongoing conflict over the Nagorno-Karabakh. The two sides accuse each other of violating the ceasefire. Meanwhile, Turkish Foreign Minister Mevlut Çavuşoğlu said the world powers must urge Armenia to withdraw from Azerbaijan's lands. Earlier, Azerbaijan said 42 civilians have been killed in Armenia's attack on civilian settlements. Over 500 people have been killed since the fighting broke out last month. Germany has vowed to completely support Greece and Cyprus over their row with Turkey in the eastern Mediterranean. Speaking in Berlin, Foreign Minister Heiko Maas called for an honest effort by all the sides to find the solution. This comes after Athens said it will not engage in exploratory talks with Ankara as long as its survey vessel remains in the disputed waters. Earlier, Turkey called for a dialogue to resolve matters in the Aegean and the East Mediterranean region. Last month, Ankara withdrew or authorized from the contested waters to give diplomacy a chance before sending it again. Athens has called on Ankara's decision a major escalation and a direct threat to regional peace. A Palestinian man on a hunger strike in Israeli prison for nearly 80 days is on the verge of death. Israeli rights group B'Tselem Salam said Maher al-Akhraz has been in administrative detention since his arrest in late July. It said the policy is used by Israeli occupation forces to hold suspects without legally charging them. Akhraz launched his hunger strike to protest the policy of forceful detentions. In the U.S. presidential election, early in-person voting has started in the state of Georgia with high turnout. U.S. Elections Project said voters have cast over 10 million votes for the November 3rd polls, outpacing the early vote in 2016. Surge in early voting caused problems in electronic poll books used to check in voters, leading to 10 hours wait. Georgia has long been a Republican stronghold, but recent demographic changes have made it a more competitive state. Malaysia's opposition leader Anwar Ibrahim has met the nation's king to prove his parliamentary support for premiership. Ibrahim declared he has secured a strong majority from the federal politicians to replace Prime Minister Muhyiddin Yassin. Police said they had opened a probe into Anwar Ibrahim's claim of a majority after a list of his alleged backers spread on social media. King Sultan Abdullah plays a largely ceremonial role, but he has the power to dissolve the parliament on the premier's advice. No political party has clearly declared support for Ibrahim so far. The struggle for power coincides with Malaysia's grappling economy and the resurgence of COVID-19. Germany says it is interested in maintaining good relations with Russia despite the Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny's poisoning issue. In an interview, German Foreign Minister Heiko Maas said bilateral relations between both the nations have suffered from a number of incidents, but he said Berlin has made great efforts over recent years to foster dialogue with Russia. Germany and France are pushing for sanctions against Russian individuals for using nerve poisoning agent. Russia has already rejected the accusations and asked Berlin to present the evidence. Belarus opposition leader Svetlana Tikhanovskaya has given President Alexander Lukashenko a 12-day ultimatum to step down. In a statement, Tikhanovskaya said she will announce a countrywide strike unless Lukashenko announces his resignation. The exiled leader said Lukashenko must also halt violence and release political prisoners by the 25th of October. Tikhanovskaya's ultimatum came as police detained 186 people at protests across the country. The president has been under pressure to step down over allegations of vote rigging in August's election, but he denies any wrongdoing. The global death toll from COVID-19 has topped 1,078,000 with over 37.7 million people infected. In India, the number of fatalities has crossed 109,000 and more than 7.1 million people have contracted the virus so far. More in this report.
The world is faring the worst as flu season approaches amid a raging second wave of COVID-19. The World Health Organization has sounded alarm with Europe and the Americas reporting a record number of cases for the last 4 days. The US continues to lead the numbers with more than 31 states, reporting a surge in new infections. On his return rally in Florida, US President Donald Trump continued his narrative against restrictions mocking quarantine measures.
I went through it. Now they say I'm immune. I feel so powerful. But there is something nice. I don't have to be locked up in my basement, and I wouldn't allow that to happen anyway. I wouldn't allow it to happen.
In Europe, after France and Spain, daily cases are also jumping in Germany. Austrian Premier Scott Morrison says the resurgence in France and Spain shows how fast all gains can be wiped by a second wave. As COVID-19 infections continue to surge in the UK, Prime Minister Boris Johnson has announced new restrictions. But the country's top medic says the measures are not enough.
I am not confident, and nor is anybody confident, that the Tier 3 proposals for the highest rates, if we did the absolute base case and nothing more, would be enough to get on top of it. And that is why there's a lot of flexibility in the Tier 3 level for local authorities guided by the directors of public health, who are absolutely superb around the country.
In Russia, COVID-19 hospitalizations in the capital, Moscow, have been steadily rising over the past week. Meanwhile, China's biggest air show, the International Aviation and Aerospace Exhibition, has also been postponed because of the pandemic. In South Korea, daily cases are back in triple digits as the country struggles to cap new clusters.
In Pakistan, 8 people have lost their lives to COVID-19 in the last 24 hours, with the death toll rising to 6,588. The Health Ministry says 530 people tested positive overnight. The ministry said there are 8,651 active coronavirus cases in the country. It said that out of over 319,000 infections, more than 304,000 have recovered so far. The ministry said over 140,000 cases have been detected in the Sindh province, while Punjab has reported more than 100,000 cases. In the capital, Islamabad, close to 17,500 have been infected so far. The International Monetary Fund says the global community must do more to tackle the economic fallout of COVID-19. Speaking at an online summit, IMF Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva said countries in serious trouble must restructure their debts as soon as possible. She also called for more grants for African countries urging bilateral donors to step up in that regard. Georgieva said the fund was pushing to shift more of its existing special drawing rights to countries that needed support the most. She said the IMF is committed to finding a way forward for countries that need to restructure their debts. Johnson & Johnson has temporarily paused its COVID-19 vaccine candidates' clinical trials. This comes after an unexplained illness appeared in a participant. In a statement, the company said an independent data and safety monitoring board is evaluating the participant's illness. It said the company's clinical and safety physicians are also monitoring the situation closely. The company said the pauses in big trials involving tens of thousands of people is normal. This announcement will delay one of the highest profile efforts to contain the global pandemic. Saudi Arabia says it is allowing Umrah in the second phase of the gradual resumption of the pilgrimage starting October the 18th. In a statement, the Ministry of Hajj and Umrah said 250,000 domestic pilgrims will be allowed to perform the pilgrimage. The holy sites in the kingdom were temporarily closed due to COVID-19. A member of the National Hajj Committee said over 600,000 people will also be granted permits to pray at the Grand Mosque. Currently, only nationals and residents in Saudi Arabia have been allowed to visit the two holy mosques in Mecca and Medina, but foreign pilgrims will also be given permission to start performing Umrah from the 1st of November. It's time for a short break. We'll be back with more stories. Stay tuned. Welcome back. In Tunisia, Prime Minister Hisham Meshishi has sacked the governor of West Central Province of Kesaran. The step was taken after protests over the death of a local resident during the demolition of his unlicensed store. In a statement, the government said that 3 other officials were also dismissed over the death of the resident. Hundreds of stone-pelting protesters clashed with the police in Shiatla town. The protesters set tires on fire and blocked several roads in Sobayatla city. Security forces used tear gas to disperse the angry protesters, with the military deployed to protect the government facilities. At least 12 soldiers have been killed in 2 separate attacks in central Mali. In a statement, the military said that the first attack occurred overnight on an army base in Socorro, killing 9 soldiers. It said 3 other soldiers were killed when they came under fire while heading to the scene of the first attack. Mali has been struggling to contain an insurgency that first emerged in the north of the country in 2012. It has since spread to the center of the country and neighboring Burkina Faso and Niger. Thousands of soldiers and civilians have been killed in the fighting to date, and hundreds of thousands of people have been forced to flee their homes. 1 person has died and 2 others have been injured after a glass roof collapsed in Australia's Curtin University. Emergency services say a roof of an under-construction building caved in near Curtin's medical school. In a statement, the university said no students or staff were among the victims. Authorities said the cause of the accident will be investigated by a work safety regulator. The university has urged people to avoid the area. Nearly 40 people have died in Vietnam and Cambodia due to heavy rain and flash flooding as tropical storm Nangka edged towards the Vietnamese. Local media reported the ongoing flooding has killed at least 28 people in Vietnam and 11 in Cambodia. Disaster Management Authorities said nearly 25,000 houses and 84,000 hectares of crops have been damaged in the recent flooding. They say scores of people are still missing and efforts to rescue them are underway. The floods are expected to worsen over the coming days, with tropical storm Nangka forecast to dump more rain as it makes landfall in Vietnam. Cambodian rescue officials reported more than 1,200 families have been evacuated to safer places. Meanwhile, Pakistan's foreign ministry expressed condolences over the loss of precious lives in Cambodia. In a statement, it said Pakistan stands in solidarity with Cambodia in testing times. In India's capital, New Delhi, air quality has hit the very poor level for the first time this season. Met Department says in the last 24 hours, the average air quality index was recorded at its worst since February. Smog is a year-round problem in the Indian capital, causing respiratory issues, irritable eyes and skin infections in residents. New Delhi witnessed a bright blue sky after years due to a fall in emissions during the COVID-19 lockdown. But resumption of public transport, burning of farm residues and cooler temperatures have blurred the sky again.
The atmosphere has completely changed as compared to lockdown. We should decrease the use of machinery and promote public transportation. It is aggravating breathing problems and there's already a coronavirus pandemic. So problem with breathing is already there for the people these days and pollution will only help to worsen it.
The UN has urged development banks to stop backing fossil fuel projects. This comes after a report found that the World Bank invested $12 billion in the sector since the 2015 Paris Agreement. In a video message, UN Chief Antonio Guterres asked the countries to ensure development banks boost renewable energy. He said the world needs speed, scale and decisive leadership at the moment. Meanwhile, the World Bank said the report gave a distorted and unsubstantiated view. It said the bank had committed nearly $9.4 billion to finance renewable energy in developing countries from 2015 to 19. The world is observing International Disaster Risk and Reduction Day. The United Nations has called for a better planning to mitigate the effects of natural disasters. UN Chief Antonio Guterres says a safer, more resilient world must be built by acting on science and evidence. He said political commitments are required at the highest levels to follow Sendai framework for disaster risk and reduction plans. Guterres says COVID-19 has shown that systemic risks require international cooperation.
Many countries are facing multiple crises simultaneously. We will see more of these. Extreme weather events have risen dramatically over the past 2 decades. Yet we have seen little progress on reducing climate disruption and environmental degradation. Bad situations only get worse without good disaster risk governance. Disaster risk isn't the sole responsibility of local and national authorities. COVID-19 has shown us that systemic risk requires international cooperation.
Researchers returning from the largest ever Arctic expedition have warned that polar ice is melting faster than ever. What about the expedition in this report?
The Polar Stern icebreaker returned to the port of Bremerhaven in Germany after more than a year drifting in Arctic ice. This was the most ambitious Arctic research expedition ever undertaken. A total of 442 researchers, crew members, teachers and journalists hailing from 37 countries were involved in the 5 stages of the expedition. Over the course of a year, they examined changes in the atmosphere, ice and ocean and their impact on the climate system in the Arctic.
The researchers have gathered an unprecedented trove of data, which will be useful for generations to come. This data gathered in the Arctic, the epicenter of climate change, will help to close significant holes in our data from this region. It will allow us to make climate models more precise and re-evaluate them.
Researchers faced challenges including mountains of ice appearing suddenly due to changes in pressure. They also encountered the danger posed by polar bears and the toll of working for months on end in complete darkness during the Arctic winter. Discussing the findings, leader Marcus Rex said the effects of climate change are more than evident in the region. He warned that the Arctic can be ice-free in summer within a few decades if humanity does not change course.
Und diese Welt ist bedroht. Wir haben wirklich
This world is threatened. The ice is dying. If we keep going as we are, then the Arctic will be ice-free in summer within a few decades, and the world I just described will no longer exist. In winter, we almost continuously measure temperatures 10 degrees higher than those measured by Fridtjof Nansen on his expedition.
The research reveals that the world needs to work for climate and reduce greenhouse gases more than ever to protect the Earth.
China has unveiled its plan to turn Shenzhen city, the high-tech hub, into a core engine of reform. Executive Vice President of the China Development Institute, Guo Wanda, says Shenzhen has good foundation to trial reforms. Beijing hopes Shenzhen transformation will power growth and innovation in the Greater Bay Area. This comes just before President Xi Jinping's visit to the city, marking 40 years since it was set up as a special economic zone. The 5-year plan gives Shenzhen more autonomy in areas such as land use, tech, hiring foreign professionals. An extremely rare, vivid purple-pink diamond mined in Russia is expected to fetch up to $38 million. The gem is being shown in Hong Kong, Singapore and Taipei before being auctioned by Sotheby's in Geneva on November the 11th. The oval gem, which is named after a Russian ballet, The Spirit of the Rose, is the largest of its kind to be offered at an auction. The auction house says the 14.83 carat diamond was cut from the largest pink crystal ever found in Russia. Naturally, colored diamonds occur because they possess a particular lattice structure that refracts light. Pink diamonds are both rare and aesthetically highly prized by collectors. Peru has opened the ruins of Machu Picchu for a single Japanese tourist who waited almost 7 months to visit the site. He was trapped in the Andean country during the COVID-19 outbreak. Jesse Takayama was due to visit Machu Picchu in March, but it closed because of coronavirus. His original plan had been to spend only a few days in Peru to visit the Inca citadel. Culture Minister Alejandro Niara said Takayama was granted access after submitting a special request. He said the ruins will be reopened for national and foreign tourists in November. The site will permit 30% of its normal capacity of 675 people per day. Discarded fabric swatches are normally either burnt or thrown away as waste, but these colorful pieces have found a second life as valuable art in the hands of a Nigerian artist. How exactly does the artist create portraits using fabric waste? This report has the answers.
Lagos-based Marcelina Akpogitor has perfected the art of recycling discarded pieces of Ankara fabric and turning it into something meaningful. Akpogitor's work effectively combines art and fashion on canvas, complemented with acrylic paint. She says the meaning of the cloth has helped fuel her work.
The fabric makes my work unique because it's an identifier. When you see it, it pulls you in. You have there's a common ground between you and the work because it's fabric. It's something that you're familiar with.
Nigeria's economy runs on crude oil, but its fashion, art and film industries garner it global recognition and feed national pride. According to London auction house Bonhams, the prices for African artwork have risen by 70 to 100% in the past 10 years.
Art materials are quite expensive. If you don't have some money, you can't get some certain materials. But these fabrics were just lying around, so I started using them to create jewelries. From there, I was also doing drawing. From there, I just questioned myself that I could push what I was doing further. So I started using the Ankara to make faces.
Akpogitor's work have sold for as much as $25,000. Lagos Raleigh Gallery found the artist on social media and was quick to feature her pieces. By now, she has sold over 100 art pieces to the gallery and hopes to explore other art mediums in coming years.
In Rome, some of the finest sculptures from antiquity have been put on display. Busts of Roman emperors and an ancient Greek relief carved 25,000 years ago are just some of the 92 pieces. What in this report?
The newly restored exhibition space in Rome's Capitoline Museums will show the antiques in a blockbuster show, the Torlonia marbles. The marbles belong to the aristocratic Torlonia family and represent a fraction of the 620 sculptures in their possession. Like many leading families, the Torlonias put their huge collection on display in the museum, but after 101 years, they locked its doors in 1976.
The Torlonia Museum was one of the most important museums in Rome for quite a long time, from 1875 through World War II. And then it disappeared in some way. This is an opportunity to see a number of works that are extremely important, that everybody knows from books, but nobody has seen.
Many of the works have undergone substantial restoration over the years, including a statue of a goat whose body dates back to the 1st century AD. Among the pieces on view is a fountain basin carved in ancient Greece that was believed to have stood in the garden of Julius Caesar.
We have chosen these pieces because they lend themselves to narrate not just the pieces themselves, but the formation of the Torlonia Museum as a collection of collections.
Torlonia marbles will remain in display in Rome until June next year. They will be shown in at least one other European country and as well as the US before returning to Italy.
More stories to follow right after a short break. Stay tuned. The European Union says it will impose tariffs of up to 48% on imports of aluminium products from China. This coincides with an EU probe into whether Chinese producers are selling the metal at unfairly low prices. The EU official journal said the duties were provisional and will apply until the probe is completed by April. The bloc could apply duties for 5 years. Responding, China's Metals Association has called the complaint groundless. The EU has won the right to hit almost $4 billion worth of US goods with tariffs in retaliation for subsidies for plane maker Boeing. The World Trade Organization decision has sparked hopes that the two sides will settle the 16-year-old aircraft dispute. The retaliation rights of around $4 billion are less than the $7.5 billion the US received in a parallel case last year against Airbus. But Brussels has identified a wide range of US products that it could hit, including aircraft, fitness machines and blueberries. Following the decision, the EU Trade Commissioner said the ruling should be the cue for the two sides to resolve the issue. Two Peruvian national football team players have contracted COVID-19 ahead of the key clash against Brazil in the World Cup qualifiers. Peruvian Football Federation has confirmed that Raul Ruidiaz and Alex Valera have been isolated and will miss the game today. The players did not participate in the final training session at Lima's National Stadium. The game is one of 5 qualifiers taking place in South American qualifying today for the World Cup finals in Qatar. Peru drew their opening game 2-2 with Paraguay last week, while Brazil hammered Bolivia 5-0. England fullbacks Ben Chilwell and Kieran Trippier have left the squad and will not feature in Wednesday's Nations League game against Denmark. The English Football Association has not stated the reasons for the departure. Local media reported that Chilwell has returned to Chelsea for checks on a pre-existing injury, while Trippier has left for personal reasons. Atletico Madrid defender Trippier was England captain in the win over Wales in last week's friendly match. He also started in the 2-1 victory over Belgium in the Nations League on Sunday. Arsenal pair Bukayo Saka and Ainsley Maitland-Niles are the two most obvious alternatives for the role. And now the weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.news.